Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner Podcast. I'm Dillon, I'm your host. And guys, today we are going to be talking about partnerships and profitability. The reason we want to talk about partnerships and profitability is because no good partnership is without profit. If you have a partnership and you're not making any money, well, it's not a good partnership. Because at the end of the day, we all need to make some money. We all need to be profitable. Also that we can grow, we can do more, and we can hire more people, grow the firm, do more projects, all the things that we want to do in construction. Again, whether you're a general contractor, an architect, an engineer, really doesn't matter. The whole point here is that we want to have partnerships and they need to be profitable. So how do we go about creating partnerships? Having partners in construction. Now, a lot of partnerships that get created are going to be ones that are very formal. The partnerships of like the Whiting Turners or other big firms that go and actually partner. They either have legal documents that are partnering or they do like true joint ventures, all that kind of stuff. Basically on projects, and they do it on a project by project basis. The partnerships that I'm going to talk to you today about really don't involve that type of partnering. The type of partnering I'm talking about is more the type of partnering that like Matt does for being a general contractor, where you have trade partners, the guys that you work with and use on the majority of your projects. I just had a meeting yesterday with an electrical contractor who we're going to be partners in a way on projects moving forward. They're looking to get into design build. We're going to be the engineer of record on projects for him so that he can do design build. Again, not the partnership and we have contracts around like a formal partnership. I mean, of course, we have project contracts on each project, saying that, hey, we're responsible for the engineering design of this project, but it's not, binding us in a partnership and assets and all that kind of stuff. So really, we're going into projects together. The more people that you can have that you go into projects together and you're basically lead generating for each other, the better off it's going to be. In our world, for going after design build projects, we end up partnering with more and more contractors since they're out in the market. They're getting approached by general contractors to do these types of projects. And so we get brought on as the engineer record with that electrical contractor. So the more electrical contractors that we partner with, the more project opportunities we end up getting. It's really pretty simple when you kind of pare it all down. And for a lot of folks, it's if you're a contractor, specialty contractor, let's say you're doing civil work and you're doing grading and all that kind of fun stuff, the more and more general contractors that you have, really the more projects that you're going to be invited to. It's pretty simple when it comes down to it. And because that general contractor is out going and getting business, really you as the specialty contractor, and again, whether that's drywall, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, doesn't really matter. The more general contractors that you partner with and work with, or just a few very big ones, the more projects you're going to be invited to and able to do for their owners, right? The ones that the general contractor is able to secure and win those projects with. So partners in construction look a lot different than like partners in a law firm or partners in an engineering firm. What we're talking about is kind of business to business, partnerships, informal agreements and handshakes on basically who are your go-to guys that you're going to have on a given set of projects for your firm. And also note that over time, this changes. In the meeting that I was having yesterday, the guy was talking about, and he'd been around for a long time, been an electrician for 40 years. And in this conversation, he was talking about, so-and-so moved from this firm or that firm, or, the top brass at this company or that company retired. So it's really important to note that in construction, we end up changing over kind of that top brass or leadership or the guy that was running projects at a given firm. And then the whole dynamic of those partnerships and companies that you thought were kind of your go-to just aren't anymore. This is why it's important to have many companies that you're partnering with, that you're getting work from, that you're lead generating from. And this goes in the design world too. In the design world, where you might have a handful of clients like a hospital system, a higher education system, where you've been getting most of your work from, and you probably have 2, 3, 4 of those, and then somebody leaves or somebody gets brought in above the person you've been working for. Well, now you end up having different people making decisions than you did before, which creates a situation where you might not be the go-to person anymore. You might not be the go-to architect or engineer for that system, that institution anymore. And that creates a pretty big problem, especially if you were getting the majority of your work from that one entity. Projects can then dry up pretty quickly when that happens. So here it's super important in architecture, engineering, as well as in construction on the field side to have just a ton of lead sources, client generation ability from different areas. Again, whether that's multiple institutions, developers, contractors, GCs, and then for GCs, again, whether you're doing a bunch of institution work, a bunch of development work, a bunch of individual owners, making sure that you have a diverse set of partners and clients that you're getting work from. Now, on the profitability side, the thing I want to talk about here is really you've got to start being comfortable with money, comfortable with taking money, with charging people for stuff. And there's always a time and a place for kind of helping people, through things, especially in the beginning of projects, right? You're going to have to do a bunch of upfront work without necessarily getting paid on it. And some of that is part of the deal. Others, you really do need to make sure that you're charging for the work, for the value that you're providing, especially you guys in the field. Anything that you end up doing is you have time in it, you have material typically in it, you have labor, right? And really that person could be on another job, another call. And so it's very important to make sure that you charge. And honestly, all you guys in the field are much better at this than, the architects and engineers and frankly, most of the office guys. So the reason I say this is, again, a lot of people are not always comfortable with money, with asking for it, with charging for things, with sending those invoices, with following up with clients and making sure that you're actually getting paid on work. So it's really important to know the numbers, to know what your profitability is, and to communicate that with your team. When I was at NICA a few weeks ago, and one of the things that got brought up is, let's say that your firm lands a $10 million project. Well, how much do your guys in the field or the rest of your team, your office staff, really think that you're making, right? If you landed a $10 million project, they think you're making $10 million, which we all know, if you have anything to do with the numbers, that is not true, right? There is overhead, there's cost, there's rent, there's their salaries, right, for all the people that are working on that project. And then on the architecture and engineering side, traditionally most firms make 5 to 10% or they lose money on a year-over-year basis. So architecture and engineering firms, frankly, don't make really any money. They make 5, 10%. And then construction firms are better since they do charge more. They know their numbers. They live in the math all day and every day, where architecture and engineering firms purely don't. Architects and engineers don't live in the math, don't live in the numbers, and really just don't execute well when it comes to profitability and money. So contractors are going to typically make, 10 to 15%, maybe 20 on the very, very high end. So contractors are going to make more money, more percentage, more margin on projects than architects and engineers do, just again by the nature of how you guys and your relationship to money. So it's super important to be familiar with your numbers, the time it takes, and then what you're charging respectively for that. See, in the field, everybody has a really good feedback loop, right? The estimating software that everybody uses has things that get fed into it to integrate back for feedback loops on how long it actually takes to put in a light fixture, to put in conduit, to put in an HVAC unit, right? All of those things are very well documented in the time and material that it takes to do that given set of work. So you usually have a good number built into all of your estimating software. Where architects and engineers fall short is they couldn't tell you what it takes to design a given room or a given project or a given square footage size. They have an estimate for it, but they suffer more than anybody else of unique projectitis. And that unique projectitis is everything's unique, everything's a one-off, everything is a special flower, and so nothing can be compared to the last project. This owner was a pain in the ass. Well, that owner was a different pain in the ass in a different way. And so that caused us to add more time to it. Well, why don't we assume that all owners are going to make changes? All owners are going to be a, quote, pain, even though they're the ones paying the bills, so they're not that big of a pain. But that they're going to be make some changes, be somewhat difficult, and we should incorporate that into our projects and anticipate difficulties, anticipate changes, and just take it for what it is. Deal in reality, not in, woo-woo land. So with that, your numbers are going to be a lot better. You're going to be a lot more profitable when you start dealing in reality. And this is why contractors ultimately make twice as much as architects and engineers when it comes to the bottom line, because you guys deal in reality. Most architects and engineers do not deal in reality in what the actual numbers are. And it shows at the bottom line of all these firms and their actual profitability numbers. So the big bottom line for this show, guys, is look, you got to have partners. You got to have people that are helping you get work, that help you win more projects, right? So more leads, more partnerships, more people that you work with on a very consistent basis. And that's really what construction is all about. People doing work together on multiple projects over years and decades together, and you become familiar, you know what they want, you know their criteria. The same goes with owners, right? Their same building criteria sets, what they want on each project, and that continuity is hugely important in construction. That's why the incumbents for jobs and projects, especially when it comes to institution work, are so valuable and so important because, again, you know what's going on, you know the things that are happening within that institution, their standards, their documents, what happened on the last project, what we did on the last project. And that's hugely important to make sure that you have continuity, that the same things are happening from project to project, and you have that consistency. Also, that you start to know the buildings, especially like in hospitals and institution work, where you start to know what's going on. And so they bring you back for more and more projects. The same goes in industrial plants, where if you were the installing contractor on a lot of things, they continue to bring you back because you become very familiar with their building, what's going on, how things are operating, and what you need to do to fix it. So huge benefits here to everything going on in construction and that continuity and having those really great partnerships. And then again, once you get embedded kind of with those certain clients and everything that's going on, you can become honestly more profitable because a lot of standards stay the same, a lot of execution stays the same, and that again creates more efficiencies in your firm, so long as you're incorporating those changes into your processes and your workflows for each and every one of those projects. So these two things, having partnerships, helps profitability, productivity, and you winning them for the long haul. So this was something that's very top of mind for me today in thinking through how we go about partnerships, profitability, and looking at some of the numbers that I see really across the industry. Been doing a deep dive into just profitability, how profitable engineering firms are, being on that side of the fence, and really seeing how poor most of the engineering firm numbers are just across the board. So really, guys, take to heart that the more partnerships you can make, the more kind of leads that you can help generate and work with multiple people, because in construction, it does take, a lot of us to ultimately win projects. So the more people that you can work with, the more folks that you can reach out to, the better off that you're going to be, and just create that stability within the firm. If somebody's up, somebody else is probably down. So it creates a more consistent workflow and steady stream of projects throughout the firm, keeping you balanced, keeping you from those big ups and downs. You're still going to see some for sure, but it'll help kind of even out the workload. Then on the other side of it is you keep working with the same types of clients, doing the same types of projects. You're going to become more productive and profitable so long as you incorporate those changes into your processes and your workflows. So guys, that's going to be this episode of the Construction Corner podcast, talking about projects, profitability, and partnerships. Until next time.